This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
He's a writer and the grandson of Ernest Hemingway, John Hemingway, on this edition of Conversations. His grandfather was one of the most celebrated writers of the 20th century. John Hemingway is the grandson of Ernest Hemingway and the author of Strange Tribe, a family memoir. The book focuses on the relationship between John's father, Dr. Gregory Hemingway, and his famous father. One can only imagine how different the two might appear. Ernest Hemingway, known as a macho, hard-living man with an appetite for beautiful women. His son spent his life conflicted and challenged with his own gender. Dr. Gregory Hemingway was a cross-dresser and on occasion went by the name Gloria. Now, my intention is not to sensationalize this because, as we are likely to learn, there's much more to the story. A deeper, more in-depth conversation is deserved. In addition to writing Strange Tribe, John Hemingway has written for numerous national and international publications. We welcome John Hemingway to Conversations. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
I know that you were not even a year old when your grandfather passed away.
Yeah, I was about 11 months. That was 1961. So he may have known that I was around, but I mean, my father was writing to him that year, but Ernest, my grandfather, wasn't really responding much because he was not in good shape. He was getting shock treatments at the Mayo Clinic and suffering from deep clinical depression. So at any rate, I did not have any conversations with him. No.
What was it like, though? Nonetheless, you certainly grew up in the shadow of, as I said in the open, one of the greatest writers of the 20th century. What was it like being the grandson of Ernest Hemingway?
Well, when I was a boy, I had very little knowledge or feeling that I was living in a family in the shadow. I mean, I think maybe when I was 10 years old, I got the idea that perhaps I had a famous last name, because my dad would never talk to me about his father when I was a kid, at all for the most part. No, I can't even remember anything. That happened later on. Also, it wasn't really important to me. My dad was, the important figure in my life. Okay, he was my hero, as I suppose, it would be for most sort of sons, who have a fairly decent relationship with their dad. Okay. Not Ernest. Ernest was something, it was a figure, so to speak. It was unreal, if it was anything for me.
Tell me about your dad.
My dad was an MD. He was a very bright, humorous, and active person. He loved playing sports. He was as good a shot, if not better, than my grandfather. At the age of 12, he won a national skeet shooting contest in Cuba against adults. I mean, he was pretty phenomenal for his age. I mean, he was also pretty cocksure of himself and everything. He knew he was good. Okay, and probably in many ways, I would say that he was, the favorite of my grandfather. I heard this one story, I think it might have even been in my dad's memoir of his father, when Ernest had chosen him to carry on the family sort of business of writing, okay, if you can imagine it. And here's this little kid, 12 years old, all right, who's put down at his father's desk with a nice sort of, pile of paper here and a pen and everything, and Ernest says to him, okay, just write me a story, okay, whatever comes to mind, And my father was saying that he felt terrified, okay, and he just couldn't think of anything. And what he did was he copied a short story of Anton Chekhov's, okay, and then changed it a bit, okay, and then gave it to his dad. And his dad didn't realize it at first and thought, wow, he's really good. I mean, he didn't want to upset his father, okay, right. So, he was capable of doing that, as probably many kids would do, sure, in similar circumstances.
But your dad became a medical doctor, though. So how did that come about? I mean, there must have been, as you just said, some pressure to be a writer. How did he?
Well, I mean, in my family, okay, Ernest's father was an MD.
Okay.
Okay. Then you have Ernest as a writer, my dad as a doctor, I'm a writer, and then a couple of years back, my son said, oh, I want to study medicine. Okay. I did not push him into this. I think this is more his mother, who was a nurse, sort of, showing him books on human, anatomy and stuff like that when he was young. But if he does go through with it, it would be an interesting sort of, Dr. Zhivago kind of scenario repeated over 3 generations, 4 generations at this point.
Interesting. Tell me about the relationship between your father and your grandfather, because that's sort of what the book focuses on. Tell me more.
Well, this is a biography, essentially, of my father. But to understand Gregory Hemingway, you have to understand Ernest Hemingway. And they were very similar. And most people might think, well, that's pretty boring, John, because, most kids are like their parents. Except that, as you said, Ernest Hemingway, has an image of, a man's man, a womanizer, a great drinker, hunter, literary genius, all these things, okay, someone who was wounded in the First World War. All these things are true. But there was another side to him which tied him, I think, quite closely to my father. And my father, who was, as you say, the cross-dresser, and who eventually also had a sex change when he was about 65, I think, or something like that, okay, in the middle of, the 1990s. And at that point, people usually say, well, okay, there's no connection here, John. There just can't be any sort of connection. Ernest is Ernest, and your father, maybe he was a great guy, but he's not your grandfather, okay? Let's be clear about that. Most people in my family subscribe to that view too. And I can say that I didn't want to go there even to know if there was some sort of connection, because I thought, if my father was that way, okay, having, he was bipolar, okay, going to, manic episodes and then deep depression, dressing as a woman, then finally, deciding to become a woman physically, okay, I don't want to know if there was some sort of similarity between him and my grandfather, I thought, because what does that say about me? Okay. Am I destined to do this too? Am I destined to go to, J.C. Penney to buy nylons or something, And so there was that reluctance. But I found that after my dad died and I wanted to write this book about him, the idea that I had that they were different just didn't fit. And my wife at the time was doing a lot to help me by researching certain texts by Hemingway scholars, which had come out since the publication of The Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden is interesting because it was done in the 1950s, and in it we find a young author, fairly autobiographical, like Ernest, okay, who's with his wife there in the south of France. Basically what they're doing is they're getting into gender-bending games, sort of cutting their hair the same length, okay, getting deeply tanned, which for Ernest was code for transfiguration of a sexual sort, becoming more African, as he would say, beyond all tribal law, i.e. trying to find that point of union between, what is a man and what is a woman, or maybe where you can't even tell one from the other. He uses, in fact, in that book, the statue by Rodin, The Metamorphosis, which is of 2 lesbian lovers. And at one point, the character, the protagonist, is saying to his lover, do you know that statue, the one in Paris that they have no pictures of, okay, referring to it. Well, we are like that. We can't tell one from the other, okay. This part was actually taken out of the book when they published it, because it was published posthumously, and my family was trying, I guess, to tone it down or something like that. I used it in my memoir, and when I submitted it to Scribner's, so they could have a look-see and tell me whether I could use it, they said, no, you can't use that part. And so I had to paraphrase it, okay. There has always been this effort on my family to, shall we say, dull this, to me, apparent similarity between these 2 men. It's almost as if you have the father, who is a writer, and what does he do? He explores this in his writing, in short stories, such as A Cat in the Rain or A Simple Inquiry. Simple Inquiry takes place in Italy during the Second World War, and you have a major who's in charge of censoring the letters of the soldiers, you know, from the front to their mothers, wives, lovers. And at the beginning of the story, you have him, he's up there, and he's deeply tanned because of the snow and the sun and everything reflecting on him. And he's rubbing coconut oil into it like this. And it's a very strange image, unless you know what tanning and having darker skin means to Ernest. It means, again, a symbol for becoming more African, more beyond, as he puts it, all tribal law, trying to find that union between the two. Normally I have usually about an hour to explain all this sort of stuff, and but I could give another example of bullfighting, for instance. Bullfighting, you know, corrida in Spain is an art form. It is not a sport. It is not fair. The bulls are raised to die, okay? But the roots of it, though, or at least one story of the roots, the Carthaginian roots of bullfighting, were such that in this ballet that you have between the animal, okay, and the torero, the matador, okay, it is the bull who symbolizes the man, and the woman is symbolized by the bullfighter, okay, dressed as they are, very elegantly, almost in a feminine way. And only when the bullfighter, after, you know, executing various sort of passes with the bull going here and there and coming very close to death, only when the bullfighter goes over the horns and exposes himself to death, because that is the crucial moment there, and puts the horn directly into the morillo, which is this huge muscle behind their neck there, and it's a curved sword, so it goes directly into the heart and kills the bull if it is a good kill. Do you have union between the two? Between the man and the woman. Only in death do you have this. This was something that his lesbian mentor, Gertrude Stein, knew about. And, well, Ernest was her star pupil. And so where does she send him to see this? She sends him to Pamplona to see his first bullfight. I'm not saying that my grandfather was gay. I'm not saying that my father was gay. He wasn't, okay? But these were men who were obsessed by this research to find this point of union. Mm. Some people could say that you're not really truly a man until you have embraced this feminine part of yourself, or vice versa for a woman. They were travelers, they were voyagers. They knew where the journey began, but they didn't know where it would end. The problem is, though, that once you go beyond a certain point, you can't turn back, because you gain self-knowledge. Mm-hmm. You are changed. And sometimes it works out, and sometimes it doesn't. This is what happens in life. And with both my father and my grandfather, things didn't work out too well.
At what point in your life did you realize your father was a cross-dresser?
Oh, I remember the first time. I think I was at, I was going to UCLA, and I went up there where he was in Bozeman for a weekend, and he wasn't there. And my brother Brendan was. He was going to Yale at the time. And so we were always driving off in the car and stuff like that. And one time when we got back to the house and I was looking through some stuff there, I saw this this wig and some lipstick. And he says, "Oh yeah, that belongs to Dad there." I go, "What?" I said, "Oh, you didn't know?" I said, "No, I didn't know." Yeah. And then I told my mother about it when I got back to Los Angeles, and she goes, "Oh, that. He was doing that back when he was with me, you know." I was like, "Oh, okay," you know, so interesting.
Did that change your relationship with him?
No. I mean, I was pretty tolerant of everything. You know, I was like, okay, you know, you want to do. I remember once, even in 1985, when I went to see him again in Montana, and it was, I think, July 1st, Canada Day. Yeah, that was it. Funny enough, but. And I was watching the Today Show, and they were having the Canadian ambassador come in and talk and everything. The next thing I know, I see my dad peek in, okay, and he's got his dress on, blonde wig, makeup and everything. And I see him, I'm just like trying to sink into the sort of, chair like this, And he closes the door quickly, and then afterwards he comes back in, he's taken off the wig, and he's like, tipping up the stairs like that, looking like someone who could never pass as a woman, okay, because they had these humongous calf muscles from playing the sports and doing the things he likes to do. And he goes, "Hi, John," just goes upstairs. I'm like, okay. I didn't care. I mean, in one sense, I was just like, all right, you want to do this stuff? That's fine. That's cool and everything. I didn't really see the deeper significance of all this, okay, because that was, 10 years before, no, what am I saying? Good God, he died in 2001. That was 1985. That was about 20 years almost, because my book was published in 87, so yeah, that was a good while afterwards, okay. But for me, even after he had the sex change and everything, I did not have two mothers. My mother is my mother, and you will remain my dad, even if you want to call yourself Gloria on one Florida license, and Greg on another. Okay, and he had two at the same time. It's always something that amazed me about the state of Florida. You could do what you wanted. Room for everyone. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about, you said your dad was bipolar,
yeah.
Ernest was bipolar. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, okay, that tends to be hereditary. Ernest's father suffered from clinical depression, and in the end he killed himself too. Also, there was a sister and a brother of my grandfather who both suffered from depression. The brother who I lived with, in the end, had diabetes, and they were going to have to amputate his legs, and so he killed himself. But being bipolar is, if you talk to the people who have it, a gift. They wouldn't want to get rid of it. It would be like, I don't know, getting rid of your right arm if you're right-handed or something. Okay, it's something that defines you. It gives you a sense of tremendous creativity at times. But if it isn't controlled, you'll go psychotic in many cases and then crash into clinical depression. And that is where a lot of these people end up killing themselves. Okay, so you need, shall we say, enablers. You need people who are going to help you, okay? But many, many artists, scientists, mathematicians have been bipolar.
Interesting. I had no idea. Your grandfather obviously took his own life, but your father did not. What happened to him?
Oh, God, that's a kind of a sad story there, because that story, I would say, started in 1951 when he was working as a mechanic for McDonnell Douglas in Southern California, had a young wife, okay, and I think either their child had just been born or was very, very young. I mean, we're talking newborn. My older sister, Rowan, Hemingway. And he was cross-dressing, of course. Getting married didn't stop him. And he decided to dress up and go out to see a movie. And what he did then was go into a woman's restroom. And if you do this in Los Angeles, back then, you're asking for trouble. Okay, and they arrested him. He had his one phone call, got in touch with his mother, who was up in San Francisco visiting her sister. She came down, paid bail, kept the press quiet, but that was the easiest thing, because then she had to talk to Ernest. Mm-hmm. And Ernest was livid. He just lit into her, into Pauline, my grandmother, Pauline Pfeiffer, saying, "You ruined him with your education, it's all your fault." And they argued for over an hour, and at the end of it, she was really shaken, okay? Really, really, really shaken about this. And later on that evening, she started to feel ill, and they had to eventually get an ambulance to rush her to the hospital. And the surgeons there discovered that she was hemorrhaging, and they couldn't find out where she was hemorrhaging. And at exactly 2 in the morning, Los Angeles time. She died on the operating table, and that was October 1st, 1951. Needless to say, my dad was really upset about this, also because he felt guilty about this. He perhaps, well, no, I'm sure he knew that had he not done that, his mother would not have argued with his father, and perhaps she might have not been so upset to the point where whatever happened to her would not have happened, okay? Ernest, on the other hand, was very generous after that, very kind to my father, and invited him, his young wife, and their baby daughter to Cuba for Christmas. And he was an excellent host, taking out his daughter-in-law to the best places in Cuba, introducing her to Cuban high society. Very good trip. Except that when it came time for the three of them to get on the plane to go back to Miami and then back to Los Angeles, my grandfather stopped my dad there on the stairs and said, you know, Giggy, that was his nickname, you killed your mother with that stunt there in Los Angeles. And this was like a ton of bricks of guilt coming down on my dad, okay?
I'm sure.
And later on, there was some very nasty letters between the two of them. And it got so bad that basically Ernest was saying, I don't want any more letters from you unless they happen to be business letters. And right now I want you to write an apology to Mary, his wife at the time, because apparently my dad had stolen a pair of her nylons and blamed it on the maid. Okay. And he was embarrassed about this, he told them. He said, because he said he was always embarrassed about this, and especially with people that he cared about, and so he lied about it. And however, these letters continued, and you know, for a while. And then a curious thing happened, that as the years passed, whenever October 1st came along, he would have usually a manic phase and then crash. He joined, for instance, the paratroopers, I think, in 1955, okay? There was a picture in one of the newspaper or magazines, I think it was Newsweek, saying, you know, hello to arms, okay, Gregory Hemingway joins the paratroopers. It was a real promo for, you know, the U.S. Army. Problem is, though, that he was manic at the time. He has to do his first jump, panics, okay, goes psychotic, and they put him in what they called, you know, the Goonie bin, okay, which is a psychiatric ward. He was given a military discharge. He didn't tell his dad at all about this. He basically just sort of said, well, I was, you know, extra. They didn't need me, whatever, okay, you know, or good behavior or something like that. And Ernest believed him. But there are other times, you know, when he was out in Africa later on, when he was writing, you know, basically suicide letters to his friend, saying he wanted to kill himself. His friend, who then gets in touch with Ernest, who then starts to get very worried and gets his son back to Cuba, sends him up to Miami. He has him do a series of shock treatments. And this was a similar, you know, a pattern which established itself throughout the 1950s. My father would have these episodes where he would break down, literally, okay? And Ernest would be there to pick up the pieces, paying for all the medical bills. I mean, he was a very concerned father. And you have to understand the man. I mean, he sees his son who has this condition, which he knows has come from him. Yeah. And yet he can't do a damn thing about it, because they didn't have lithium. That didn't come out until 1966 and wasn't even commercialized until 1970. And so you either drank, which made it worse, right, or you had shock treatments, which is not exactly managing it. It's just snapping you out of the clinical depression. That does work, but you know, it takes its toll. I remember seeing my dad once after one of those periods, you know, and it was as if, you know, many parts of his memory just weren't there, you know.
Let me jump in because I'm getting real tight on time here, but your dad ultimately died in prison?
Yeah, he did, and what I was going to say was that he died, he'd been arrested in a manic period, you know, and he died on October 1st, 2001, at exactly 5 in the morning, okay, on the day when he was supposed to be arraigned and everything, of a heart attack, exactly 50 years to the day, to the hour of his mother's death. Just to give you an idea of
Wow.
how that affected him. You know.
I want to just touch here on about 3 minutes left here on you, and this is all in the book, the stuff we've been talking about. You, personally, John Hemingway, what are you doing these days?
Well, right now I'm working on a collection of short stories, some of which I've already published, others which will come out with the collection itself. I am also right now talking with some friends about a fishing show on cable TV, deep sea fishing, mostly set in the Caribbean, around Key West, the Bahamas, that sort of stuff. And I do lectures like this. You know, I chop wood, wash dishes.
Do whatever you need to do, huh? Yeah. Absolutely. And I'll take a quick answer from you because, like, unfortunately, this is an hour conversation, but unfortunately we only have about 30 minutes. But being the grandson of Ernest Hemingway, for you as a writer, was that a blessing or a curse?
Well, in the beginning, yeah, it was a tremendous, I would say, curse for me, although people would say, oh, what do you mean? It's so easy to get it in. And, well, yeah, but there's also finding your own voice. And until you do that, you're really worried about what you write. But when you find your own voice, you realize that you can only write using that. You can't pretend to be any other writer in the world. And so at that point, it becomes something much more interesting, because it's at that point that you realize I can see how good I can be. Ernest was fantastic, you know, chapeau, you're a great guy. Yeah. I don't know where I'll go, though.
Interesting. We'll look forward to continuing to keep track of you. The name of the book, Strange Tribe, I'm assuming it's available probably on Amazon and
yeah, you can get it on
various
Amazon,
bookstores and around. What a pleasure visiting with you. Fascinating story.
Thank you.
Best of luck to you.
Thank
John
you.
Hemingway. Good luck on that fishing show. I know you're looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
It's a bit easier than writing.
A little easier than writing, yeah, I can imagine. John Hemingway, the grandson of course, the famous writer Ernest Hemingway, and of course John in and of himself a writer, not only the book that we were talking about, but also many short stories and articles for national and international publications. By the way, you can see much more, or I should say many more, of our conversations online at WSRE.org/conversations. I'm Jeff Weeks. Thank you so very much for spending some time with us. I hope you enjoy the broadcast. Take great care of yourself. We'll see you soon.
Support for this program is provided in part by these corporate sponsors. And by viewers like you.